Ladies and gents, we have a sponsor. Beer 52 have agreed to sponsor the podcast. Amazing news, and there's brilliant news for you guys as well. We'll talk you through it now.
Rob, as you know, I've been absolutely balls deep in craft beers for a few years now, and I love finding those little hidden gems that you don't find in supermarkets, and that is where Beer 52 comes in.
The best thing about it, Joe, is that they're offering a free case of 8 craft beers, sourced, curated from over the globe. All you need to do is go to www.beer52.com/fishon and cover the $5.95 for postage.
Beer 52 is the world's most popular craft beer discovery club with over 100,000 members that they send a brand new case to every month. Each case has a different theme, and recent cases have included beer from New Zealand, the USA, Ireland, the Alps, and loads of the best small batch breweries in these British Isles. If dark beer is not your thing, you can simply choose the light option and your case will come from the award-winning beer magazine Ferment and a tasty snack. Don't worry though, if you do change your mind, you can pause or cancel your account at any time.
Just go to www.beer52.com/fishon to get your first case of 8 beers for $5.95. That's www.beer52.com/fishon. Hello, ladies and gents. We have got a special guest for you today. But
Super special guest.
A super special guest. But before we introduce him, you've probably realised there's been a little advert at the start of the podcast. We've got involved with Beer 52. There we go. Nice one, Joe. It's so hard to get a sponsor in fishing, as everybody knows. So to get something going with Beer 52 is great. We're not twisting your arm behind your back by any means to go and have a look. But if you like your beer, go and have a look. You've got a special deal there. The special guest for today, very relevant, very current.
Very timely.
Very timely. Jamie Cook. Now, this guy, we're hoping is going to give us a bit of an insight into what's happening with fishing, not only now, but maybe the future as well. How are you, Jamie? You okay?
Yeah, tired, Rob, but yeah, not too bad. I'm fit and healthy, and the family are well, so that's all we can ask for at the moment.
Talk to me how busy you've been.
We worked out or my wife worked out rather, that through 1 week, I think it was last week, I'd worked 80 of 96 hours over a period. So that'll give you a sense. But it's for a cause I love. So to be honest with you, if I'm not going to do it, who else is going to do it? So that's how I'm looking at it.
What does that entail then? What does that work schedule, what does that entail? Does that entail you putting things together, being on the phone, contact people, going to people much higher than we can sort of comprehend and speaking to them, or is it tapping away?
Yeah, definitely not comprehend, Rob. I mean, there's no sort of top table, if you like, that no one's got access to. It's simply the fact that I guess you've got an awful lot of work in developing policy, and when you're developing something like this on a campaign basis that you're going to put to government who are risk averse, you have to take a huge number of views. And what I'll be completely honest about is that I don't know every discipline of angling. I don't know every current situation. I'm not a fishery owner. I don't work for the Institute of Fishery Management. I don't know everything. So the best thing I can do is take input from experts in their field and develop that policy with the best laid plans, with the best thought out view. And then from that point of view, actually, it's getting it heard. So yeah, we lobby the right, that we work through Support England, we lobby the right areas of government, we know who we're speaking to, we know who we need to engage with. But actually, the whole reason we have a democracy is that people listen to their constituents. And you've had a period that we've been through for, 7 weeks of lockdown, 6 weeks, where we were working particularly actively, where every MP is sat there. And if you imagine them, and you'll see the kind of feedback that the Angling Trust get or other bodies get, you know it, you understand it, times that by 100, and you're sat there as an MP, and there's nothing you can do for your constituents, and you're hearing some really horrible stories, some stuff that actually sort of, it potentially brings tears to your eyes, and you can't do anything about it. So to go to an MP with something proactive, positive, to say, look, I'm a constituent of yours, this is something that really means a lot to me and matters to me, I'd really appreciate your support. They've absolutely loved it. It's been giving them something proactive they can get behind. And I think that's why, as a result, you've seen the number of references angling has got in a national policy document. I mean, it's probably had more references in this single document than it has over the last 20 years across any document combined. So yeah, lots of phone calls. I've become an absolute expert of video conferencing, as I'm sure lots of us have. And then, yeah, lots of text messages, emails, bouncing around between different people, trying to understand and unpick policy has probably been the last week. And then the big challenge is comms, because we're in a position where we're through Sport England, we're the national governing body for the sport, we're recognised as such, that's in England. And they've said to us, we need to interpret and guide our constituents. Boris has said you all have to be responsible for what you're doing and the positions you're taking. So what we can't do is sit there quietly and just wait for every single nuance and detail to be written down and handed to us on a piece of paper. We're given a piece of guidance. We've got lawyers working with us. We've got barristers offering their opinion on items. And then we've got a former MP in Martin who's been an absolute Trojan through this, in ploughing through bits of legislation, knocking down doors to get us into the right rooms. And so it's incredibly varied, but we're working at pace, and we're trying to do the best job for the sport, because it's the sport that I love and I've always loved. So that's the only reason I took the job. It wasn't for anything else. I just felt that angling and anglers needed a strong voice and needed to be as well represented as we could be. I mean, so sorry, it's a long answer to your first question.
No, I mean, what nice. A first project that's been, Jamie. I mean, blooming heck, you've been thrown into the fire as such, haven't you, with that?
Well, you can probably imagine, Joe, like I served a 6-month notice period from my last job to come into this one.
What was your last job, Jamie?
So background for me is I've never been in fishing politics. I've never worked for a fishing company. I've got not affiliated with anyone. I've got no axe to grind. I worked in business effectively. So I worked for a company called EMAT, FTSE 250 business. I spent 8 years there, was a portfolio director for their environmental side of things. Moved then to Business Insider, Newswire publishing house, ran their operation in southwest of England. So that's lots of different assets, but basically you're getting news out to businesses. And I wouldn't have known the Angling Trust role was available had it not been for a friend of mine who works for Drennan, actually, who flagged it and sent me a text message with a link and said, you should be doing something like this, do something that's worthwhile. And yeah, that was the Friday, closed on the Sunday, had to put an application, a CV together. And yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, you guys can make their decision. They picked me. So we'll see how we go.
Your fishing background then? What's your fishing background?
Fished my whole life. My dad was an absolutely passionate angler. I grew up fishing the Kennet and the Thames, learnt to trot a float there. One of the first people I spoke to was Dick Clegg, who phoned me up. Don't know how he got my number, about 5 months before I started. And I said, I started fishing with your floats, Dick. And yeah, learnt to fish a float and a feeder on the rivers, catching roach. Roach have always been my absolute passion. Love them. Whatever I could catch. Close season in place at that point. So June the 16th was always on one of the local gravel pits trying to catch tench or bream. As I kind of grew up, my dad's passion again was specimen coarse fish. And so I'd be traipsing down every weekend to the Hampshire Avon, stood in Ringwood Tackle, looking at all the pictures on the wall and thinking that's what I want to catch. And I was really lucky to have that, I guess, that apprenticeship of fishing the Avon through the early 90s. And huge fish, incredibly good anglers in that audience. And I was cutting my teeth in an environment that I was well out of my depth in. But I was lucky, I caught some big fish. And then my dad passed away when I was 14. And it really changed my view of fishing, and it changed the direction I took, because it was effectively my fishing partner. And so many of us come into it through a member of the family or someone who inspires you to get into it. It's not like football where you can stick a couple of jumpers down and just play a game. You need to be taught and your skills honed, because that'll make you more successful and that'll breed that fishing habit. So I had a bit of a dabble at competitions. I wasn't very good, probably wasn't disciplined enough and couldn't act quick enough, but and I always wanted to catch the bigger fish rather than lots of little ones, but that's just me. And then I moved on, went off to uni, fished a little bit there, And I met a guy there who ended up being my best man, who loved his carp fishing. And I moved up to London to work, was living in London. And so it was pretty difficult to fish around a social life when you're early 20s and living in London. Aside from the fact that you could get out, do a quick overnighter on one of the pits nearby, come back in, have a shower at work and go and do your day's work. So I took up carp fishing, spent a sort of decade specimen fishing, so probably carp fishing, big barbel, big tench. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd fish for fish with names. I couldn't understand it. But actually having done it, I really enjoyed it. Trying to catch a single fish and work out what it does and its habits and whatever else on a limited amount of time. I really enjoyed it. And now I've got 2 young kids. Time's even shorter. I've got a job, as you'll have seen, that's probably taking up more time than I'd hoped. So we're chatting here today. I haven't even considered where I'm going to get out on the bank. I'm glad people can now. And yes, I'm trying to pick up different aspects. So I've gone back to more of the general course fishing, not at the level that you guys do, but general course fishing. I've picked up a lure rod for the first time, really, and whether that's sort of drop shotting on the local canal or whether that's going off to the coast and trying to catch things off the coast. I love fishing. So fly fishing is probably my weakest suit. I've never really done that much of it. I can't say that anyone who'd ever coached me in how to cast a fly would be proud of that effort and use it as a testimonial. But yeah, I just love fishing, Rob. So whatever I can get out.
You've touched on something that I want to mention as well a little bit later on if we get time, and that is the fact of how difficult it is to maybe get into even a different aspect of fishing if you've not got anyone to show you the way.
And understand
At the minute, I just want to go, while we're not being able to go match fishing, I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll go and try and catch a big carp, or go to do a bit of specimen carp fishing, maybe take my lad for an overnighter or something like that, or just a day session. I tell you what, I don't know where to start. And I've been fishing all my life, and that's just a little step into a different side of fishing rather than coming fresh into fishing. So I think that's worth talking about, maybe a little bit later on, about how difficult actually it is, quite difficult to start fishing. Or switch.
And Rob, sorry, it's particularly difficult for someone like you or Joe because you're towards the sort of top of your trade in what you do. And I think it's easier where you're maybe not as good, but not as specialist in an area to kind of dip into different. I mean, people always say jack of all trades, master of none, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
But fishing's such a broad church that there
for
are
me
so
though,
many
it's where do we even go to do it? What rods do I need? Just little things like that. And I know obviously the basics of the kit, but you turn up to a lake and it's a syndicate only, and you think, oh well, I wonder where another lake is that's going to hold a decent fish. So maybe my targets are quite high with the fish I want to catch, but it's still difficult to get into that side of fishing. And I imagine someone that's just coming into fishing, okay, they can go down the canal or they can do all those traditional routes. But I'm trying to think of a commercial fishery in my area that's relatively underfished, or somewhere that I haven't been before. I'm struggling to think of places. And
we're working on something for that, Rob. But that's probably not that's probably not for today. But
no, it isn't for today. It's something that is close. It's something that's close to me, because obviously I've got two boys. My dad took me. Joe's dad took him. Your dad took you. And I always feel that we're losing the younger generation of anglers, which without a doubt we are. I just don't know what can be done to get that up to speed again. And I think this could be an ideal time. The kids are off school, dad's, mums, whoever's the fisherwoman in the household, they're maybe getting a bit of spare time at home because they're not working as much, or they're furloughed. They could maybe take the kids fishing, and maybe there could be some sort of initiative to get them out. I'm not too sure what that is, but this could be the ideal time to get them out. But I'd like to say maybe it's one for another time.
No, well, just a quick one on that, Rob. We've just got to use this as an opportunity now where the eyes of the world are on us. And I spoke to the head guy, or he's not the CEO, he's the head of Sport England. And his view was, it was really interesting. He said fishermen must be the happiest people in the country. Is that you've got more concessions than anyone else. You can go out and enjoy your sport. And the last thing I'm going to say to him is, well, there's issues here, left, right, and centre. And actually, what we're doing is we're going through and trying to address each of those key issues for each of the demographics. But what it shows is we're such a broad church. We all do things in a different way, and it's so diverse. I mean, most sports, if you can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's not that different. But the difference between holding a 16-metre pole or casting a fly or sticking a lead 120 yards tight to an island is, and look at the sea world. I mean, look at the opportunities to go out and fish in a marine environment. And I don't know about you guys, but when we're allowed to, I mean, the thing I'm looking forward to is being able to go on holiday with the kids and the wife again, but actually being able to catch something off the beach or off the rocks. The kids love it, and it really inspires them. But it's that opening, and where we are in participation, as someone described it to me the other day, is it's not that there's no demand in the kids still love it. It's that for whatever reason, that breakdown in that parent level that we're at, Rob and Joe, I don't know if you've got kids but the three of us, is we love our sport, and we want to do it, and we want to get out and do it. There are lots of people who maybe tried it as a kid, it didn't stick, but it's that teaching level there, and we're all so busy at our rough age group that we're the ones who have, that's how kids learn, is through people like us.
Yeah.
And it's that's where the break is. It's not with the kids wanting to do it. It's
when I look at what my dad gave up to take me fishing,
same.
It was a night a week teaching the local junior club, because he used to teach those. Then it would be a Saturday at the weekend taking the juniors to whatever competition or whatever fishing session that we're going to have at the weekend. So his fishing or his spare time took a massive hit, as well as taking me probably an evening in the week on my own during the summer. So it was a massive amount of time. And obviously parents haven't got that time.
Did your dad keep diaries, either of you? Fishing diaries?
Not for me, no.
No,
I've got my dad's old fishing diaries.
My dad can barely write.
And mine would have been too embarrassing as well.
Now, I've got my dad's old fishing diaries, and it's such a lovely memento that I've got. But it shows, and I looked at it, and it shows as I got older and how many of his sessions changed from being him going out fishing for him to him fishing for me, effectively.
Yeah.
And the amount of summer evenings where it's 6:30 till 9, just getting out, and it's like Jamie caught 3 barbel, John nothing.
Wow.
And you start to see it, and actually he gave up his own fishing to bring me into the sport. And we're in a culture now where we're so cramped for time, trying to rush around, fit everything in, do it. It's really difficult for people to do that. And there's no finger to point. It's a challenge that we've got to address. But actually looking at participation as being a problem with the youth, I think we've got to look at it more holistically of how do you actually facilitate those young people who want to fish, who've got that latent demand to do it and they're interested. How do we get them into it? But that, as we say, that's a challenge for another day once we're back up and running.
So let's go back to how busy you've been. Who gets consulted with all the decisions that you've been making as regards getting us back out on the bank in the last couple of weeks?
So when we put the piece together, as I say, one of the things was clear is we had to consult far and wide. So we went to someone like John Ellis at the Canal and Rivers Trust was brilliant in terms of giving us that. I thought you'd be drinking your beer with your sponsorship.
I should be drinking the beer, but it is a little bit early. I'm not as hard as Joe.
But yeah, from the so Canal and Rivers Trust, Institute of Fishery Management, we consult with the ATA, and then we've gone out to experts in each individual field, and you'll see some of them from the document. And if your listeners have seen the document that we've put together, it's pretty comprehensive. But the summary shows some quotes and headshots from some of the people in that respect. And I know I guess your audience is primarily match anglers, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of match anglers, yeah.
So if you take, I mean, the guys that were particularly influential in it, Steve Ringer was absolutely brilliant.
Never heard of him.
Loads of insight. No, I hadn't either. But,
don't roll your eyes again, Rob.
He's got some good ideas. Dean Barlow, superb.
Yeah, what a man.
His knowledge, absolutely brilliant. And then Dave Harrell were probably the three who really led from the guys who are experiencing it on the coalface who are out there fishing.
Okay.
And they've each got the reason they were really useful is the fact they've each got a slightly different view of the sport. They come from a slightly different area, as I understand it, of match fishing. So we sort of got different views there. And then once we delivered the document, what those guys were brilliant for doing was sharing it with another, and I think we've got about a dozen top match anglers that have endorsed our document and what we're trying to do. But every line of it was scrutinized as you can't believe. Every line that was put in there my job was literally to ask, why is that in there? Why is that in there? Why do you recommend that? And then try and pull it together. Then if you imagine that, we've got the same with fly fishing, we've got the same with specialist fishing, we've got the same with river fishing, you've got the same with carp fishing, and you're trying to build this single document that covers all eventualities of our sport, that makes it as applicable to the government's guidance as possible, so that when we come back in a phase safe response, the key thing is once we get that back doing it, is we've got to be seen as ambassadors for the sport, that we're not part of the problem, we're part of the solution. Yeah. And then everything else will happen quickly from there. And so that was why when we put in place the phase guidance, we looked at, under the current guidelines, what do we think we can do safely? What can't we do? And then you almost had to take a next level of what can we do legally? So where there's difference between what a government, and this has been really difficult to manage, is what is a guideline and what is enshrined in law. And so that's been the tricky bit. And I know we'll come on and talk about competitions and match fishing, but the problem we've had in that...
I'll let Joe ask that question.
Yeah, Joe, we'll come back to that, is that enshrined in law is the piece around organised gatherings or events. And the definition of that is that if it's more than two people from different households, the government enshrined in law deem that as an organised gathering or event. So it completely pulls the rug under our feet, where we're working with, particularly someone like Dave Harrell, who we work with on Riverfest. And you look at Clint down at Whiteacres on the weighing solutions. You look at what we put in place for our competitions before we went into lockdown. We know we can run a match, for example, following social distancing guidelines. That's not the problem. It's this underlying piece of it's an organised event or gathering. And where you can even get to the point and argue the technicality over, you avoid the gathering. So if you do it in these ways, it isn't actually a gathering of people, but by definition, it's organised that everyone gets there at the same time, does the same thing, and then leaves again. Whether that, however well that's managed, it gets lumped in with all of the other sporting gatherings. And because we're under Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, that's who's guiding us. So from our perspective, we're working on that. But I think my view is that we've got fishing back. We've started to make some headway in Wales. We've addressed the issue around fishing at night that's currently permitted, and we've had that confirmed. The next focus is if we can get through this weekend without a PR disaster or something pushing us back, full focus can go on to the two areas that we probably need to address there, which are getting competitions back and supporting the charter boat industry in the marine environment. And that's where me and my team are focused. If we can just get through this weekend sensibly, not have that worst case scenario, that's what we can push on into next week, is show this is the blueprint for how we come back safely. And this is how we can do to mitigate any risk. We can prove as anglers we can follow it. We can prove that we're allowed the next step. If we can't, we're going to struggle to prove that we can go any further than we are.
So as far as match fishing is concerned then, Jamie, we've obviously, we know that there's like safe practice in your guidelines, you know, to get everyone back out on the bank safely. Is there a plan then for match fishing, as in, have you consulted with people, as in a weighing-in procedure, a draw procedure, something that we can maybe take forward and present to government or MPs, whoever you do it with? Is that sort of happening, or is it?
Yeah, it's exactly what's happening, Joe. So it's as I say, the first focus was let's get back fishing. Let's prove that we can do it compliantly. Let's deal with all of the curveballs. And I think Sport England has I've got it written here as a note, as the bumps in the road and potential U-turns we'll face over this week. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we're kind of through most of those. Yeah. As I say, we had some guidance before we went into lockdown for competitions, but the focus coming out of this weekend that I'll be looking at this weekend with various stakeholders, and actually when we're offline, I'll take some advice from you of who we should reach out to that maybe I'm not already engaged with, will be to draw up a single set of even more robust guidelines for how a fishery can, or how a competition organiser like us can safely, COVID compliantly run a competition that puts us in the absolute best position that when the government do review that position on organised gatherings and events, we can say, well, look, in this sense, we can run them. In this sense, we know that we can do them compliantly. But that's the work that I'll be starting from today, working through the weekend, and then into next week consulting on. And that's where from the community you've got listening, we need people to work with us and reach out. I know there's anger. I know there's frustration. I know there's people saying, why have you done this and why have you done that? And I guess all I can say in this environment is there's nothing that hasn't had a huge amount of consultation and thought go into it.
Yeah.
And we've got to work within those enshrined in law pieces that the government have put in place. And also for us as a governing body, we've got to show that we're belt and braces, we're responsible. So pieces that have gone into the guidance, things like the 15 metre suggestion, is best practice. Yeah. It's what our competitions use. And I know you guys fish, and all of the competition anglers I've spoken to have said, look, I want to be pegged as far away from the next guy as possible, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But there's a balance to be struck. And we know that fisheries have been through a period where they've been locked down completely. They haven't been able to generate revenue. So there's a natural feel that they want to get as many customers as possible. So we're trying to give some guidance that fisheries can follow to fish safely. And from an individual perspective, I think the thing to remember is the reason these things are in place. I mean, people are still dying every day. People have lost loved ones and family members, and this is going to have a fundamental effect on the way we live our lives. And the reason the guidance is in place, the first and foremost point of reference is it's got to keep anglers safe. And as individuals, if we're sitting there, we've got to feel safe in the environment we're sitting there in. And we've been pretty clear to say, or I hope I've been clear to say, if you're a fishery owner and you're not comfortable opening, don't open if you don't feel that you can do it. If you're an angler as an individual and you're not comfortable going out, you don't have to go. No one's forcing you to go. You've just got to be comfortable in what you're doing. So
when you're talking about gatherings and matches, it's not the Angling Trust saying we can't have a match. It's the fact that it's the law to not have a organised gathering. So it's not the Angling Trust saying we can't, because with all due respect to the Angling Trust, they're not creating the laws, are they?
No, you're absolutely right.
If someone wanted to go and do something, they can still do it. Just because the Angling Trust advises them not to do it, they can still go and do it, can't they? So if someone wanted to use, for instance, a keep net, it's not the best practice, because that's going to put angling in a bad light, and it's against what we're trying to achieve for the long term. But no one can come down and say, you've got a keep net in there, mate. That's against the law.
The keep net thing was probably one of the more contentious bits that went in, and the number of discussions we had around, does it go in, doesn't it go in? And it had the backing of all three of those key advisors to say, this is what we should be doing. But it was never a case that we saw it as a long-term solution. It was really a case of how do we get through this short-term piece to go from transition as quickly as we can from phase 1 to phase 2. And I took the advice of the guys that know it better. And part of their thinking was the fact that most commercials won't allow keep nets unless it's a match anyway.
Yeah.
So on that basis, it made it very easy to manage for a commercial fishery, because
I guess you can just drive in, look, are they having a match? And then you could see straight away if someone's having a match, and then drive out if people wanted to police that aspect of it.
Yeah, but it was also the fact that what we didn't want was, lots of fisheries have got series of lakes on the same complex. And what the competition guys I spoke to were saying is, look, if you have got one lake where people are sat there and there are keep nets everywhere, and the next lake is a pleasure anglers, and they're sitting there thinking, well, why can't I use one or whatever else when this guideline's in place? They're more likely to blow a whistle against their own community. And bearing in mind, we've got more freedom than any other sport at the moment. The eyes and the ears of people who can't go out and do their own sport are going to be on us like never before. And people are going to be looking at, oh, look what they're doing. They're not following the guidance. They're breaking the rules. Yeah. The disaster looks like a photo of a bunch of guys sat on seat boxes with keep nets pegged really close together, or a bunch of guys on a pier, tops off, beers in hand, stood shoulder to shoulder fishing, that's plastered this weekend in particular all over the media to say, these safe custodians of the waterways, this safe solitary sport, they're not all they're cracked up to be, because our credibility is shot.
We're almost trying to paint the picture of the old school angler sitting on his own, relaxing, enjoying his fishing. That's what we're trying to paint the picture of.
Yeah, just the public face has to be that we are complying with what the government say. We're taking that approach. And yeah, the piece around keep nets, you're right. We're not, it's a guideline from us for best practice. Did that
need to be there? If obviously hindsight's an amazing thing, did that need to be there as long as matches were adhered to? If you had to write it again, would the keep nets issue have arisen, or would it just be the fact that matches?
No, so this is another point of discussion, Rob, and this was another point of consideration before we wrote it. What we didn't want to do, and bear in mind, I've just come into a role 3 months, and the key area that I look at when I've run businesses. I come in and I look at this as a business. We're not for profit. We're a trust. We're not a charity, by the way. It's clear, and it's probably worth a couple of things to cover off. We're not the Environment Agency. We're not funded by the Environment Agency, aside from the fact that we run a couple of projects under contract for them, which we deliver. Sport England, we're about maintaining active lifestyles. It's not UK sport, which is where you get elite performance. So we get paid nothing from the government for Team England or whatever else. We represent our members as individual members, and match anglers make up about 20% of our membership, give or take. A percent or two, but it's about 20%. And so from that perspective, I look at it and think, right, that's a fifth of my audience are there. They might be there anyway for certain areas, but they're there as a gateway because they fish competitions. And my organisation runs 360 competitions a year across different disciplines. This is a massive part of what we do. Yeah. This is a big risk area for us, but it's a massive opportunity as well. And what's pretty clear is the fact that match anglers don't necessarily feel that they've either had a fair deal, they've been represented.
It's not all match anglers.
No, I appreciate that, but we're talking about the fact that there is a feeling there. And so for me, coming in my first 3 months, I'm thinking, right, well, the first place I can make ground is actually let's go and engage with the competition anglers like they've never been engaged with before. Let's talk to them. Let's ask them. Let's set up a steering group for how we run the best competitions, what they want to see. Let's use my experience of going out and dealing with big corporate sponsors to try and bring money in from outside of the sport to the sport. And let's try and resource competitions, make them as good as they can be. And then that will feed into the international layer. Then we get hit with this. And for me, when we were looking at drawing this up, what I didn't want to do is make match anglers feel victimized that, oh, look, it's not the Angling Trust again, not worried about match anglers. So if we'd have said from that initial point of guidance, you can't fish matches, but pleasure anglers, you can go out and use a keep net, I think we'd have really enraged some match anglers at the fact of saying, you're literally just focusing on us. So what we agreed, and what we agreed with those 3 advocates we talked about, or the people who inputted, is that we'll put this in place blanket initially, and then we'll review it. We'll get through the initial bump so that us as a sport, we can portray ourselves as professionally as possible. People aren't tempted into going and running a match which they could be fined for as individuals fishing, or the police could attend, as we've seen already from yesterday. And let's just get through that initial weekend, and then we will focus working with the competition community on drawing up the most robust set of guidelines that we can go back into Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport and say, look, we've led the way on phase 1. We put this in place proactively. It's been adopted. Now we're leading the way on phase 2. And phase 2 can happen really quickly under this guidance. And by the way, look, our community have followed what we said. They see the bigger picture. So that's why we did it the way we did it. It wasn't without thought. It wasn't without consideration. So to answer your question, Rob, I'd probably do the same again. I think there was logic to do it. I know it's been unpopular in certain areas, and I really hope we'll transition really quickly from it.
If someone would have said to me 2 weeks ago, you can go fishing again in the next 2 weeks, i.e. a couple of days ago, someone said to me 2 weeks ago, you can go fishing again, you can't go match fishing for a bit, and you can't use a keep net, I'd have snapped the hands off. And
we were saying that for weeks, Rob, weren't we?
We've been saying that for weeks.
Don't we? We just want to get back out fishing.
Yeah, of course. But I love my other styles of fishing. So I do loads of lure fishing. My first day out was lure fishing yesterday for a couple of hours with my lad, doing, as we spoke earlier, I hook the fish, he reels it in, that sort of thing. So not really fishing, but out on the bank. I can wait for a bit of match fishing, and I can wait to put a keep net in. But I know some people, that's what they love doing. They love going match fishing. That's their.
It's understandable, isn't it?
And honestly, I think. Sorry, Joe. I think if we genuinely thought that we could find a way that it was compliant, it would be more in my interest running the organisation that run that many competitions. And we've got Fishermania lined up, we've got Riverfest lined up, we've got the Nationals coming up. It's in our interest almost more than anyone else's to run matches. So if we genuinely thought we could do it, we would do it. If we thought we could do it in a compliant way with that what the government have set out, we would do it. And as soon as we can, we will do it, which is why next week is so important, and getting over this weekend is so important, which is why this is really good time to chat. Because if we can then put that plan together and present it next week, we're again ahead of that curve of when we know the next review's coming up.
Because I think the bugbear, and obviously I touched on this with the sort of safe practice for getting match fishing started again. I think one of the match anglers' bugbears was that the night fishing thing got passed and it got presented to Sport England to do it safely, blah, blah, blah. But has that actually happened for match fishing? So you're saying it hasn't yet, but it's in place, it's in position for next week, the week after, whenever. But it is happening, and that's the key point to get across, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to pick your battles to a degree. And the night fishing thing came up because of the way that the government worded its piece on travel. So the government positioned their piece on travel, verbally saying, it was never written, which is the really interesting bit, verbally saying you can travel as far as you want, provided you come back on the same day. And so what we flagged was the fact that, because what the government are trying to do, just to give an overview, is there's various different departments that have all got different responsibilities. And what they're trying to do is avoid tripping each other up. So writing something, and what they talk about is a phrase that you'll hear said, unintended consequences. So you put that in place if you are the Transport Secretary, but then it has an impact on another government department that they didn't intend. So what they tried to do from Monday, when the initial announcement was, and that 50-page document, which, by the way, getting angling and tennis as the only two sports in that document only came about through the work that we did and the support, more so, that we had from the community in writing sensibly to their MPs and saying, look, I want my voice heard? Because we can get that in the door and we can say this is the legitimate position we take, and we can lobby for it, but nothing influences politicians like numbers done in a sensible way. So the thanks go out to any of your viewers or listeners, who've honestly, who took that time to write to their MP. You don't know how much of a difference it makes doing that in that way. And those MPs were sitting there wanting something positive. They weren't sitting there packed with work to do, thinking, oh no, another moaning letter. And we saw people turn it around in minutes to say, I've read it, I think it's absolutely brilliant, I'm sending it now to the Cabinet Office. So from that side of things, we've done a huge amount. And that period from Monday to Wednesday, what we flagged was there's a difference in the fact that under your licence from DEFRA, the Environment Agency, you're allowed to fish under these conditions. So that's fine. Under the guidance that we're getting from what you can travel to do, that would preclude you fishing through the night. And we flagged that, and we simply said that is a nuance and a difference in the way the wording reads. And then DCMS through Sport Insights, that's Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, if I call them that, it's just general, that's what they call themselves, came back through Sport England, because I was on a call with 38 other chief execs of governing bodies. And they basically came back to all of us and said, look, what we've been asked to do is collect the pieces of where it doesn't quite fit. And most of the other governing bodies are further behind because they're not allowed to participate. So we were able to pick up with them and say, look, this is the area where it's inconsistent. We can challenge the area or question the area on organised gatherings, but I think the sentiment's pretty clear from what the government is saying around organised gatherings and events. But the area we flagged that was inconsistent was this piece around the wording of, is this or isn't this allowed? And they picked up and they came back to us and said, right, well, what we've done is we've changed the wording to this. And that is participate for as long as you want, provided at the end of your participation, you return home. And that's what's freed up that position. So we've then gone back and got it checked by DCMS, who cover sports, and they've said, yes, this is absolutely compliant. This is what it was put in there for to do. The problem is that we've got, from a perception point of view, this is all going on behind the scenes. Nothing gets published then for however long, but we're told, get this out to your community because they're all going out today fishing. You've got a load of people loading up the van to go for 24 hours. And what you don't want them to be is non-compliant. So we're having to get bits of communication out before the government have published. So we're being told what's going to come out. We put the advice out and immediately we get thrown back at us. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Look at this, look at this, look at this, pointing at completely different things. Where we've already had that conversation, we know that's there. That's the conversation that's taking place behind the scenes. So we're acting on the best available guidance coming straight out of the government to us because we're seen as their, rightly or wrongly, as anyone wants to argue, we're seen as their vehicle into our community. Mm-hmm. So when we're putting out guidance, it's based on that. And we know that people see it different ways and have got different bits of evidence, and they might be able to cite what sort of politician said or a policeman. But currently that's our position because that's what's come out of the government and what's been checked. Then people say, well, give us proof. You're like, well, how do you prove what someone tells you to do on a phone conversation? Yeah. How do you prove a piece of guidance that someone gives you and says, this is what it is, take it forward? Do they want that email printed? It's a really difficult one, but it's to come back to the point, we cleared that up. And I hope we did the right thing and a good job by the community in clearing that piece up. The next piece to focus on is clearly, now we've got fishing back, we've addressed some of the bumps in the road, there's got to be competitions and charter boats because it's the next phase. We publicise it as the next phase. And yeah, Joe, that work is ongoing. And anyone who wants to work with us proactively, that work with us, not against us. Tell us what you need in it. Tell us what best practice is. We'll share it with the community. If it's right, we hope we've got a dozen top match anglers. We've got a bunch of fisheries who are engaging with us and talking to us. We want to get it right because the worst thing for us is we don't get it right because at the end of the day, we're going to run competitions off the same basis. Yeah. So if we can give a gold standard of this is the future competition, we're all in the best place. And the quicker that happens, the better.
Because some of the fisheries have actually come up with some really nice little solutions. I know, probably shouldn't be advertising it just yet, but they're actually doing some nice solutions for weighing in and draw. So, there is progress there, isn't there? And it can be done, I think.
Yeah, Joe, they're brilliant, some of them. Yeah. Some of the ideas, like the weighing in thing down at Whiteacres, I think is a great idea. Yeah. Really innovative, shows how you can do it. The draw, we know the timing of people arriving in the car park, drawing and going to their peg to avoid the gathering. It's not that we know there's really innovative ways to achieve social distancing.
Doing this, the draw could be done like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Live draws like this. And I was on the phone to Matchroom yesterday talking about if we can get Fishermania back on the timescale that we've talked about, then brilliant. And we talked about, but actually we're going to have to do things slightly differently, or it's likely we're going to have to do things slightly differently, which is fine because we can all innovate. And so some of the innovations are fantastic and I really applaud them. And everyone that gets sent to me gets logged in a little folder of all the things that we can consider and put in place. Because what that gives us is it gives us the ability to come back quicker than we otherwise could. Because what we can do is we can show that social distancing we've got covered, we've got addressed. The only thing that's holding us back is this piece in law around organised gatherings and events. And once that changes, if we've got a robust set of guidance that avoid the gathering aspect, that the applaudable innovation that people have put in place delivers, that we can all come together and say, right, we all sign up to the same guidance, we'll follow it, we'll be compliant, then actually, as a lot of people have said to me, matches will be arguably safer than pleasure angling and will be safer than pleasure angling because they'll be so well regulated by people who have got a vested interest in doing it properly. Yeah. So that's the journey we're on.
Yeah. So a quick message just to like fisheries and match organisers. Would you accept, different ideas and stuff like that if they can get them to you? Is that a thing 100%. Worth doing? Yeah.
Yeah, please do send them to me and my team to review. I mean, luckily through those dozen or so competition anglers, the number of emails I'm getting from them who are saying, have you seen this? Have you seen this? I mean, that Whiteacres weighing solution, I reckon I've been sent that link 200 times. Yeah, the views on his page, probably there's a proportion that are me or my team that are looking at it and every time we agree with it. there are other things that have been, Dave Harrell's been particularly proactive around, look at this is the way you can do this is the way you can do that. But yeah, any fisheries who've come up with something clever and innovative, get in touch with us, because
How
if
do
we
they get
can
in
work
touch?
together. So I'll send you across an email address if that's all right. I don't know how you'll
Perfect.
overlay it, but
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
send
just
it
put it on the
across to
screen.
you.
Put it over the top.
Yeah.
Jamie, tell me, you know how obviously we've been fishing now, what, 2-3 days?
Yeah, third day, isn't it?
Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah.
What's the reaction been? Have people been behaving themselves? Are you or the Angling Trust happy with how it's gone so far?
Yeah, we're really happy because you'll know this from doing what you do. When you put your head above the parapet, you get a fairly vocal minority, and it often seems quite a big minority, who have an axe to grind or be negative. But the messages that we've had have been pretty poignant, actually, and fairly overwhelming. And stories of, we got one from a London bus driver the other day talking about how the fact that he could actually get out and go fishing this Friday. He normally night fishes for carp, and he was like, I'm just going to take a float rod down to the local lake because I just can sit there and get away from it all. Because can you imagine how stressful that, and my dad was a bus driver, can you imagine how stressful that job must be at the moment, with people, particularly in London where you know it's rife, people getting on your bus thinking every next person could be a risk. We've had key workers getting in touch. A good mate of mine's a paramedic up in again in London. And the fact that they've now got a route to be able to do what they love doing safely, that they can get behind. Some of the messages have really been pretty poignant about what fishing means, and that mental health side as well. I mean, I guess looking at competitions, we maybe don't think about it in the first line of our consideration, but the number of people who have talked about the benefit it's given to their mental health and having that escape and that time to engage with green spaces or blue spaces, I think there's an awful lot of good. So yeah, by and large, the response has been brilliant, really positive. People just glad to be out. There have been frustrations from individuals that have wanted clarity immediately. And there is some of the questions that have been asked of my team, I have been quite difficult to deal with in terms of how much more clarity do you want? But what I would say is that, and the Angling Trust are there to be shot at. I get that. I understand it. This scenario, this situation we're in, where we've paved a way back for fishing, is not an excuse for people to come on and abuse my staff or my ambassadors. And while I'm leading this organisation, I won't stand for it. I won't have it. It might have been all right in the past. It's not going to be all right moving forward. No. And actually, where the eyes of us are on the sport, that doesn't just show us when we're out fishing, when we're out doing what we love. That's the way we conduct ourselves online as well. And so anyone who's been looking in at some of the comments that we've had, or some of the things that have been said, or some of the abuse that I can't call it anything other than abuse, that paints angling really poorly. And that's not something I'll put up with moving forward.
Okay, right. So go on then, Joe.
Well, Jamie's got, what is it? BBC you're going on to next, Jamie?
Yeah, they can wait for you guys, don't worry.
Oh, well. I just wanted to, if we've got 10 more minutes, just sort of give match anglers something that, a time scale maybe. I know it's almost impossible question, but is there
what I was going to ask anyway, Joe.
Yeah.
So
perfect. There you go.
It's the light at the end of the tunnel question, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
So it depends how you read the government guidance. There's something in there that looks at it and saying organised gatherings, and it pins this date in early July around the phases. I think they call them levels that the government have put in place in their guidance.
Hold on a minute. One of them's just smacked the other one.
Right, Rob,
could you not hear them crying downstairs?
I couldn't hear them, no, but I could see you saying shush. Shall we carry on without you for a minute?
Yeah, carry on without us. Hang on. Carry on.
There we go. Joy of kids, eh?
Yeah.
No, Joe, I can hear him now. I think the light at the end of the tunnel question is a really good one. And I think what we're focused on is the fact that let's get through this weekend in particular, sunny weekend where the eyes of the world are on fishing. And the reason that the BBC are doing interviews with us is we're one of a few sports that can lift. Yeah. And so let's get through without a PR disaster. Let's follow the guidance and just be a little bit more patient to get through this weekend. And then my commitment to anyone listening here or watching here is the fact that we will strain with every sinew as we have to get fishing back, to then move on to the areas of our sport which we can't follow and we can't do. And so that work starts from today. That work will develop into over the weekend and into next week. And those fishery owners, those competition anglers that have got something productive and proactive to offer into that discussion, get in touch, come and work with us to get match fishing back as soon as possible. Because actually, we've seen from this government that things can change really quickly. And if the R value goes up, then things will go backwards.
Yeah.
If we keep on the same trajectory we are, we can start to make really coherent arguments proactively and give them solutions as to why our competitions can be compliant, and then put that in front of mind, because we've influenced some of the things that they've put in place, as we can see from the number of times that angling or fishing is referenced. We can do the same thing with competition angling. And I would want to be in a position whereby early next week, we've got something that the community can get behind, that we can all agree on, that we can drive as a community towards the people who make the decisions to try and move it forward. Yeah. But I think what I would echo, Joe, is, and it's the same with fishing, or generally fishing coming back, we present the how. That's our job, is how do we do it safely? The decision on when isn't the Angling Trust decision. That decision will have to remain with the government, because it's part of a much bigger picture. But if we can work with competition organisers and competition participants to get the how absolutely watertight and spot on, and buy in from those people that they will deliver on those guidelines if they're agreed, then we have got everything in our favour to go and drive that argument. And we'll do it for you. We'll fight in that respect. Because I say, 20% of my constituency, and that's the people who actually actively join, are competition anglers. So why wouldn't I represent you?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. How many members in total has the Angling Trust got, Jamie?
Depends on kind of how you cut it up, but they're individual members. There are about 15,000 paying individual members. Okay. In terms of affiliates through clubs, we've got 2,200 clubs and fisheries that are members of the Angling Trust as clubs. But the key distinction there, Rob, and it's a really good question because I didn't understand it before I came in, is if you buy an EA rod license, you're not a member of the Angling Trust and you're not represented by it. If you're a member of a club or a fishery or an association who are affiliated with the Angling Trust, that doesn't make you an individual member. So where we're talking about some of the big issues, and let's set aside the situation we're in at the moment, those big issues that we all know impact our sport, that will continue to impact our sport long after hopefully this situation's gone, that I intend to represent anglers and fight on with the same vigour as we have through this period, although I might need a break of a couple of days to get out of the bank. I can, in that respect, I represent my individual members. So if people, the problem you see is you see people post, if you do X or Y, I'll join. It doesn't work like that because we're a membership organisation. What we're saying is if my members want me to act on something, I've got a mandate to do it. They're telling me that's what I want you to do on my behalf. If people from outside say, I'll join you if you do this or that, it's flipping it the wrong way around. So actually, match anglers are almost, as a collective, are in one of the best positions to drive what we do because a large proportion of you are already members. The reason you're members is fine. You by and large, match anglers want to fish the competitions that we deliver, and I hope that will continue, and we'll continue to deliver better and bigger competitions, or what the market wants. But you're all represented by us because you're members. And in that respect, you've got a clear voice, and we'll give you that voice. And what I really want and hope comes across from this is that you're not being forgotten. You've been considered as match anglers at every point of the discussion. And we might not all agree on it, but I hope you can understand, or the people listening can understand some of the logic behind it and can at least see, look, I see where he's coming from and I see where those guys who have supported him are coming from.
Brilliant. Well, Jamie, I think I can speak for Rob. Is he back, Rob?
Rob's back, yeah.
I'm back. Hey, did you not hear I've had the dog barking. Oh, dog barking.
Rob, you need a break. You ought to get out fishing.
I ought to get out fishing.
I went yesterday. I loved it.
What did you catch?
Loads of fish, carp, everything. It's just nice. We were just sat there thinking, what's better than this?
Oh, you touched on it earlier. To get mentioned as in such a small amount of activities that we were allowed to do, I think that's great. But there's so many people who wish they were doing their hobby or pastime or sport, and we're out there doing it. Whether we believe that we're annoying anyone or doing anything dangerous or not. It's just great to be out and to be able to do it when a lot of people are still stuck at home and they can't do what they want to do. So,
on Rob, what I'll feed into you from that CEO forum, because I didn't even know it existed. But so all of those governing bodies, the CEO sits on a single, what is normally a meeting. At the moment, it's a Zoom. So you can imagine the number of faces you've got on it. The vast majority of sports are running around now. The government guidance has come out, trying to see how they can be compliant so that at the next phase they'll be allowed. Because we were ahead of that curve and we were proactive, we were in that first line of guidance. So I think we timed it right. I think we had to be proactive. Otherwise, we'd be the same as everyone else. Angling wouldn't have got the mention. And anyone who disagrees with that and says it would have happened anyway, I can respectfully tell you I've got confirmation that you're wrong. That's not the case. We have influenced what the government have done and why they've allowed fishing to take place. And we just have to do so responsibly now, because all of those sports and all of those participants who are their governing bodies are now working to that next phase of how do we get our people back. They're all going to be looking at other sports that have been allowed back. And there's going to be a degree of jealousy. It's understandable. Imagine if it was flipped the other way. And can you imagine?
Yeah. No, the jealousy, this is where the jealousy comes from. There's too many people who want to go and do their thing. And I drove home yesterday from my little hour spell on the laws with my lad. And I looked at the bottom of our school, the college field in our sort of village is a college. And they've got a load of football pitches. The one right at the bottom, there was a 7-a-side game of football going on. Reds versus Blues. So obviously they've organised it. They've messaged each other or whatever, got a little group together and they're having a game of football. Now, I'm not the sort of person who's going to dob them in and say, oh, you're doing that. Get. Although probably I should be, because obviously maybe they're causing a problem. But there will be a lot of people willing to have a word to grasp people up or to paint those people playing that game of football, maybe rightly, in a really bad shade of light. And if we as anglers are doing something that's maybe not quite right or maybe frowned upon, there'll be so many people who jump on us saying, well, they're doing that. Look what they're doing. If they're allowed to do that, if they're allowed to group together, why can't we? And there'd be so many different organisations looking at that.
And Rob, do you know where the key difference is? And it's a really good point you make there. The key difference is that you watch something that isn't allowed.
Yes.
That people were doing that they shouldn't have been doing. Now put it into our context. We are allowed. But
we're allowed.
If we are allowed and we're allowed and we've got the freedom to do what we're doing, and yet we still break the rules, that's where the whistleblowing will come from. Is people who are jealous will say, hang on, you're allowed to actually do what you love. You've got given all of this freedom, and yet that's still not enough for you. You're still breaking the rules. That's where we'll get the whistleblowing. That's where it's different from your analogy, Rob, is the fact that you knew those guys shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and people will maybe blow a flag or blow a whistle or raise a flag of it. People will look at us with that degree of jealousy of the fact that we are allowed. And that perception, the guy from Sport England said to me, anglers must be the happiest group of people in the country with what they're allowed to do. They can go back to doing what they're doing and enjoy it. And we have to focus on the positive at the moment, while still looking at the fact that a considerable number of people absolutely love the other areas of fishing that are still currently prohibited. And we need to work with the same vigour and effort to get those things back as soon as we possibly can, and make the right argument for doing so that we support those people, because we can't just focus on the fact, right, we've got general fishing back, that's job done. I'm already looking at the next one. But the only way I can look at the next one is absolutely solidifying the foundation we've laid this week by people following the guidance, not getting caught out over this weekend by doing something they shouldn't be doing, avoiding the PR disaster. Because if we go back into lockdown through us not following the guidance, our credibility's shot. We won't have any ability to argue that we are a safe sport that follows guidance and we're responsible. And actually, it's sad to say it, but the only place anglers will have to look to blame is other anglers, because we won't have followed that guidance, that freedom and responsibility that we've been given.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to avoid. So the first thing is, let's solidify the fact we're allowed to fish. And I think if we can get through this weekend politically, then we've got the chance to move on. But that's the message.
If you scale everything up to the worst case scenario, and there is more and more problems because obviously more people are allowed out, and then in a week's time, virus cases go through the roof. On the same day, there's a picture on the front of the paper of a load of anglers all grouped together, and the headline, "Anglers to blame." You just never know what could happen. I mean, that is a massively scaled up worst case scenario. But I think just for, like you say, next couple of weeks, play the game. I think there's a bigger picture to look at as well.
Let's get through it. People are going fishing before they can see their families.
Yeah, you can't. A lot of people
can't.
have families. Yeah. People are dying, and we're allowed to go fishing. I mean, I think for me personally, match fishing it's a little bit further down the list for me personally. And I, in theory, I'm a professional match angler. So it's great that we can go fishing. Maybe the matches can wait.
Yeah, I hope so. And all I want to get across to, because I know a lot of people watching our match anglers for you guys, is that I am working for you. I will continue to work for you through this period. And then when we come out the other side, because I love my sport. I love any sport. I've played literally any sport I could growing up as a kid. And I want to see our sport move forward, gain the limelight it deserves, and actually improve the competition infrastructure that the Angling Trust delivers in the future as well. So the first thing for that is getting us back up and running. Second focus is how we move on proactively to get competitions back. And then longer term, let's get these people who we've engaged to work with me to actually drive the sport forward. Because when you look at other examples of what having a strong governing body, you look at something like darts, for an example. Having that strong governing body who could take it out beyond where it was in the background. Sorry, I'm ringing. To actually extend its profile, get it out there into the masses and show what a brilliant sport it can be to engage people. There's no reason we can't move in that direction. We're not necessarily going to get there overnight, but we've got a sport that engages thousands of people every Wednesday or every Saturday, or going out doing whatever else, doing what they love. And in a competitive environment. And I really want to work on developing that and moving it forward. And I think we have got a bright new future. You've got the commitment from me that I'm interested in it, I'm focused on it. And I think judge me by my results as well is the other thing. I'll come on and have this conversation with you. I'll speak to anyone who wants to speak to me, because I've got nothing to hide. I've got no axe to grind. I'm just a guy who loves fishing, who thought fishing needs a strong governing body. And I hope that I can build on the foundations we've got here of pulling people together to all push in the same direction.
Brilliant.
Superb.
Jamie, thanks for your time.
I can't get here now, Joe.
It's only 11:30. It's a bit early.
It is early. It's too early even for Joe. So what? Who you talk to on the BBC?
They've got a campaign that we're doing a series of interviews with for the sports that have been allowed this week. Okay. So they're trying to get their stay alert message out by talking about different things that people can safely do. Because I think what they're saying, the briefing I've had from them, is the public is still a bit nervous about going out, about doing anything, and rightly so. I can completely understand.
Nervous. I think people are pooing their pants. When we're out and about, there's so many people, they don't want to be anywhere near you.
No, and that's why they're looking to sports, and why they want to interview those 3 or 4 sports that are coming back now, is the fact that actually we're the ones that have put in place robust plans where they can do it safely. So I think what they're trying to get out is that communication over this weekend that, look, you can go out, you can do certain things safely, and look, here's a blueprint for how you can do it. So for us, if we're going to have people who have maybe lapsed in the sport coming back into it, or attending their local fishery for the first time in a while, let's make sure the sight they see when they come through, hopefully the open, sanitised gate into the very well-spaced car park, is the fact that they see a bunch of anglers loving what they do, enjoying it, smiles on their faces, happy to be out. And if we can do that this weekend, we'll do a huge amount of good for our sport in the long term.
Perfect.
Well, I think that's the perfect note to go out on, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, cheers, we really appreciate it. Thank you, Jamie.
Keep at it.
Keep up the good work.